Hi, and welcome to your Urban Connection. Remember, this is the channel that is often imitated, but is never duplicated. And we talk about things here that others refuse to talk about. And today is going to be no different. You know, we're very early into the new school year, and already we have seen fights. We have seen uh, people uh, being transferred to the hospital as a result of these fights, and most of these have occurred in the high school. But now we have another situation, ladies and gentlemen. We have a situation in our schools that I want to talk about because the school district, in my opinion, is not doing a very good job of handling these situations, these problems that occur with our youth. So I want to send a message to all of you parents of school-age children in our public schools. So let me just tell you what happened just a couple of days ago at Coleman Middle School. That's right, middle school. I didn't say high school, middle school. And then we want to address this situation with the school district. 5 Coleman Middle School students have been disciplined after they ate edibles containing THC. Now, that's a drug, in case you didn't know. One parent says his child thought it was a regular piece of candy, and he should not be suspended for being a victim. Now, the parent of one of the Coleman Middle School students wished to remain anonymous, but said his child was suspended for 3 days for eating what he thought was a piece of candy. The dad's main concern is that the candy could have been laced with fentanyl. Okay? And fentanyl, for those of you that don't know, and I don't know who that would be, but that is a very, very deadly drug. Hundreds of thousands of people each year die from overdoses of this drug called fentanyl. Yeah. The school's response, and I don't really care if you're talking about this incident with these kids eating candy that has THC or what they thought was candy, and maybe some of them knew what it was. But I don't care if it's drugs. I don't care if it's fights. I don't care if it's guns. I don't care if it's racial slurs, whatever. The school districts, now I'm not just talking about here locally, I'm talking about school districts all across the country. The common answer that they have to these problems is we can't talk about it. We cannot talk about punishment for the students. You know, ladies and gentlemen, whatever happened to being proactive instead of being reactive after we've had a deadly incident? And that's exactly what's going to happen if we don't change our tune and start talking about not necessarily the punishment, but talking about the solutions to these problems that we're having. And one of the problems that I have with USD 259 over the last 5 to 10 years, they've refused to be transparent with the parents and with the public about what's going on in their schools. And all is not well. Let me just tell you, all is not well in some of these schools, but they're never going to tell you about it. You don't hear about it. Here's an incident right here. I doubt very seriously that this is the first time that something like this has taken place. And I'm not going to say Coleman, but maybe Coleman, but something like this has taken place in one of our public schools. And I'm talking about K through 12. It appears to me that these kind of incidents are occurring to students at a younger age all the time. And now here we see something that we normally would think would be taking place in a high school, if at all, is now taking place in a middle school. In this particular case, Coleman Middle School. But nobody wants to talk about it. Well, you know, the reason that the escalation of fights have taken place in schools is because nobody wants to talk about them. Unless someone is injured or, Lord God forbid, one of these fights turns deadly. Nobody wants to talk about these incidents of drugs in the schools unless it turns deadly. And sooner or later, it will. And nobody wants to talk about the guns in the schools until there's a shooting, normally a mass shooting. But what are we doing to be proactive to prevent any or all of these things from happening, ladies and gentlemen? You simply don't solve a problem by not talking about it. When we're saying here that a parent, and in this particular case, if this parent is the reason that we know that the suspension, at least for his child, was 3 days. Because the school district will never tell you that. They will tell you we cannot talk about punishment. We cannot tell you about what we did. Okay, we can't tell you about what we're doing to correct this situation. So my question is, are you doing anything? Or are you just waiting for an incident of this sort, this nature, to be deadly? Now, one of the things that this parent said, this parent who wants to be anonymous, is that his concern here is with this candy, that at least what his child thought was candy, could have been laced with fentanyl. And had it been, he says we could be talking about a whole different situation here. And I agree with him. Yeah, the school district will tell you that all the public schools are supplied with and equipped with Narcan. Narcan, of course, for those of you who don't know, is a drug reverses the effects of fentanyl, or in case you have a fentanyl overdose, or someone is diagnosed with fentanyl in their body. This Narcan can reverse that and save a life, hopefully. But the question I have is, while we may have those in the schools, are there sufficient people in the school that know how to administer Narcan to get the desired results? We say we don't know because they can't talk about that, or they won't talk about that. And this has been the situation with USD 259 for a number of years now. And I can tell you, at least I'm being told by people that allegedly are in the know, that all is really not that well with the USD 259 system. I have been told, and I can't verify or confirm it yet, but I'm told there is some covering of some incidents going on at USD 259 public schools. But let's get back to the issue. So these schools, and I don't really care, basically, the school district, because it's like I said, it's going on all across the country. These schools are hiding behind a Supreme Court decision, which in most instances talk about you cannot talk about the suspensions, the punishments, or whatever to students, especially if it occurs off school grounds. But in this particular case, it happened at school. But you cannot talk about these because of freedom of speech. So these school districts hide behind that ruling to keep from being transparent about things that are taking place in the school. So I want to talk to you parents and let you know, you had better start having the talk on a regular basis with your students. And let me just tell you, it cannot start too young. We're seeing here in this particular case and in others that this kinds of thing get started anymore at a younger and younger and younger age. And once it gets started, it's hard to stop. So if the school district doesn't want to be transparent and talk about the punishment, at least talk about what you're doing to prevent these kinds of things from happening again. Are you doing anything to educate these students about the use or the deadly use or the harmful use of these drugs? Are you doing anything to talk about what the consequences of fighting in schools? They're not there to do that. They're there to learn. But are you talking to the students about the consequences of bringing weapons to school? And if you're not doing any of that, how can you expect it to stop or change? It will only get worse. It's not going to get better. Parents, you have an obligation because it's clear now, or it should be clear, that the school districts are not going to do their part in finding solutions to these problems. So one of these days, and it's just a matter of time, somebody is going to get a phone call about their young child who has entrusted the public school system to look out for the safety and well-being of their young student. You're going to get a phone call, and it's not going to be the kind of phone call you want. Just take my word for it, ladies and gentlemen. It is just a matter of time. Now, let's look at the facts. Some of these fentanyl deaths, matter of fact, most of them, have happened to people under the age of 25. Let's put it that way. And I maybe could say 20. But these people do not understand. And I'm going to tell you, some of these people that are selling these drugs are misleading these kids by telling them that there are certain ways you can use these drugs. And I'm talking about those that are laced with fentanyl. They're telling these kids that you can use it by snorting it, okay, and by shooting, and you won't die from it. Ladies and gentlemen, that is crazy talk. But your young kids are gullible. They don't know. They've not been educated. They're not being told at home about the dangers of utilizing drugs that they bought from some guy on the street or that they acquired from some kid at school who acquired it from somebody on the street. Or maybe it even came from home. I don't know. You never know these days. But the fact of the matter is they're not being trained, they're not being taught, they're not being educated by neither the parents nor are they being educated by the schools. So where are they going to learn the dangers and the harmful effects that these kinds of things can have? When I was young, we were taught at home, you don't get in the car with strangers. Okay? Now, today, folks, that's minute compared to the other situations that can turn deadly on our young kids. You have to teach these kids the harmful, dangerous sides of taking candy that you have no, if it didn't come out of a box, if it didn't come out of a package that was sealed, you don't take candy from strangers. You don't take candy from other kids because you don't know what's in it. And they don't know what's in it. And the person that gave it to them might or might not know what's in it. This dad, this parent here says, hey, I know the dangers of this kind of thing because I've already lost one child to a fentanyl overdose. So I can certainly understand that he's concerned. But I would also say to that parent, sir, if you have not been having the talk with this student that is now on a 30-day suspension and tell him how lucky he is that in this particular case, the candy that he ate only had THC and was not laced with fentanyl. The next piece of candy that he accepts from somebody that does not come out of a sealed package that he thinks is only candy might not be so fortunate. The next piece might be laced with fentanyl. We've got to deal with this problem, ladies and gentlemen. It's a problem that is growing leaps and bounds every year in our society. And that means in our schools, on the streets, in the clubs, wherever people are. These things are deadly. These things are harmful. We've got to start educating the children, or we're going to find some of those children are going to be found to have taken, possessed, and ingested more than they bargained for. And these schools, I'm going to tell you, these school administrators are going to have to do a better job of informing and educating the public on what the heck is really going on with these students and how they are attempting to be proactive rather than reactive to all of these situations. Just simply saying we cannot talk about it is not going to work anymore. But only if the parents will start to let the school administrators know that when you bring your child to school and you place them and place your trust into that school administration to look out for the well-being, not only his public safety, his safety, but for the well-being of that student, you expect them to do just that. And you cannot do that if you're not being transparent and if you're not putting into place some policies and procedures that will include talking to, educating these young students. I'm telling you, better get a grip on this. So I would suggest we've got an upcoming election here in November. And there will be some candidate forms for the school district seats that are up for a vote. And I think it's time now that we start to ask some questions on these candidates that are running for school board and maybe even the school board's personnel that's already in place about what the hell is going on in our schools. What are the schools doing? Or what are they planning to do to address these issues of fights, of drugs, and of guns in our schools? Now, I know we've got a system now, we've got these metal detectors and whatever, but that is not enough. It needs to be drilled into these kids' heads that all of these fights, drugs, and guns have consequences that can turn deadly. I'm going to say that again. The fights, the drugs, and the guns have consequences that can turn deadly. And it's happening all the time. It's happening all around us. It's just a matter of time before it happens to one of the students in USD 259. Be proactive. Administrators, don't be ashamed or afraid to talk about it. Stop hiding these issues from the parents and the public that are taking place in your school district. You're not doing us any favors by doing that. Or you might be able to think you can sweep some of this stuff under the rug, but it's just a matter of time before you will have to have a talk about a deadly situation that you could have possibly stopped. And maybe you will subject the school district to a large financial lawsuit. Okay? Get a grip. Open your mouth. Open your eyes. Be transparent. Put it out there. Let's talk about it. Because it's not going to go away. And especially if we refuse to talk about it. Thank you very much for watching.